Let's stand and we'll have the prayer and the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our most gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to gather here once again. We want to start off by thanking you for the friendship that we have and ask that you be with Mr. Carson and his family as they're going through this trying time. Lead, God, direct them through this and keep your loving hand on them. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to be here, gather here. There's a lot of places throughout the world right now where something like this is unavailable. We pray that you'll just give us the wisdom, the knowledge, and the courage to make the decisions that we need to make, and that we do so in the best for our students, our faculty, and our staff, and the members of this county. Thank you, Lord, for everything that you've done for us, all that you've given us. For in your precious Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. I've actually called to order the meeting to order now rather than previously. Approval of main agenda. You have that before. Are there any changes to it?
We shifted Novus, the discussion about the critical needs grant to the beginning. In the preliminary agenda, we had Stephanie first, but Stephanie said, let's go ahead and give these folks the opportunity to speak first because they have a distance to travel. Okay.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
All right. All in favor by show of hands. All right. Mr. Sale.
Tonight, we're going to discuss the next part of the critical needs grant application. We received agreement from the commissioners that we could proceed with putting the package together. Novus architects are going to talk us through several options. And by the end of the evening, I think it would be a good idea if we could go ahead and we could select one or two and then take those suggestions, maybe perhaps recommendations, to the commissioners tomorrow evening. We'll need for you to go with us to that. And if one of you could perhaps get away, Travis can't be there tomorrow night. And of course, Mitch is occupied at the moment. And I think it would be good for us to have a couple of our board members, if you have time. And that meeting is at 6, if you can. Now, if you can't, I understand. I know that's the last minute. Okay? So, Ms. Emily Kite has been leading us through the facilities study, which we will also be able to bring to you at our April board meeting at the latest for a final look. That will encompass everything in the school system. But because we were already involved in that, Ms. Kite and Novus have helped put some numbers together and not some recommendations, but some options for us. So, Emily, if you would lead us through that, please.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I think a lot of faces are familiar, and you've been sort of walking through this process a little bit with us leading up into this point. And I think it's important to know that the master planning and the needs assessment work that we've been doing sort of identified kind of the biggest priority need for the district as a new middle school building. There's a good bit of renovation work identified for the existing middle school, and we felt like it'd be really kind of time to talk about having a new middle school. And it lines up with the needs-based grants that are coming from DPI this year quite nicely. And so the presentation tonight's going to a little bit give us some building blocks to take forward into some future planning and to look at some options and some results of some of the ongoing planning study work that we've done up until this point. And so as a start of what it is that we're proposing as part of the grant application, we've got really two main portions of work that we've identified. One of those things is a new middle school. And for planning purposes, we have identified a couple of key characteristics of that school that's helped us put some budgeting together. We're focusing around about 95,000 square feet for the new middle school building. We're looking at a 3-story classroom wing that programs nicely for each grade level. We've identified a need for really a high school-sized arena-style gymnasium with spectator seating to help accommodate seating at a high school graduation and other things that could serve both the middle school and the high school, and it would gain you sort of an extra gymnasium facility as well for the district. We've got a building that we can control after school use, so we can open up portions of that building to access for after school. We also have obviously paid attention to traffic circulation and accounted for bus drop-offs and card riders as well. The second piece of this, of course, is also athletic fields. We've identified some deficiencies in the athletic fields, and we could use a new practice field with a track around it. And in some of the options that we're going to look at, we're talking about some replacement fields where we're taking space where current fields live, and we would replace them in a new location. And so that'll trickle through in some of these things. As a next step in the planning, which DPI allows for as part of the grant process, we would continue to vet that 95,000 square foot number and really build ourselves a detailed program that gives us exactly a tally of square footage. That number comes from our experience in building middle schools, understanding what your current enrollment is, understanding what your current school building looks like for your middle school, and where we might be missing some programmatic elements that we need to consider as we move forward. So that number gets a lot more focused in the next stages of planning that would be natural for this project. And as, of course, most of you know, we have spent a great deal of time talking about the site. And we've got really the high school site, and we have a piece of property that 45 acres across the street where the high school stadium currently is. And that's been one of the big parts of the study and the work that we've done. And we've really kind of identified a pretty big goal for that particular 45-acre parcel as we move forward and continue to plan for new construction on that piece of property. And that goal is really to control costs. The big reason for that, of course, we know that this particular site got very steep terrain, and buildings like flat areas to build on and fields like flat areas to build on. And so when we look at a site with steep terrain, we're looking at some things that really are going to influence how we propose a design solution that accommodates building and fields. And we're talking about accessibility. We know we have to be accessible in our buildings and our ball fields for students and teachers and spectators with disabilities. We've got traffic flow to consider on a site with really limited access points off of the major roads adjacent to the property. We're working with controlling the amount of retaining walls that we have to build as we start to move dirt around the site. And we're looking at the volume of dirt that we need to move around to make flat areas, and whether or not that dirt is able to be redistributed on site, which is a pretty substantial part of the cost. As we continue to move forward in the planning, there's some key questions that we'll need to answer about the site. One of those things is the soil conditions. Doing a geotech report of both the 45-acre parcel and the property at the high school is going to be important for us to understand what the soil conditions are and its suitability for construction. We also have to identify whether we have rock. Excavating rock is also going to be part of our considerations as we move forward. So the geotech and the surveying would be another logical next step in the planning process for us to continue to move the project forward. On this particular site, one of the things that we have really come across as the big driving factor for costs on this site is really how much dirt we're moving. And we've gone through a lot of different options. A lot of you were in the room as we moved pieces of paper to kind of say, what if we put stuff in these particular locations? And that's really the big driver of costs and what we can anticipate in terms of a budget for developing that 45-acre piece of property. We've looked at options and solutions that start to look like they could balance. What balancing means is the dirt that we move from one area has a place to go on site that we can put it in a different area. So we're cutting dirt from one place, we're filling dirt in another place, and none of the dirt has to leave the site. We've also looked at options that look like we need to remove 400,000 yards of dirt off-site, and that's an extreme cost to the project. And so in all of that analysis, we've learned some key things and some things that are sort of informing some of the options that we're going to look for as we go forward. So the site work has been a big part of our conversations because it's a big place where we're going to be able to impact cost as far as the project goes. I want to walk through some of those concepts. There's really two main concepts, and we've got a couple of options under each one. The first is option A, which looks at what happens if we make use of the flat area on the high school campus and build a new middle school adjacent to it inside of the loop road that you have already planned. So the loop road on the screen is all the stuff in yellow is part of that loop road construction, which I think is scheduled to start this summer. A new middle school building would fit inside of the loop road. You can see in gray on the screen, there's some parking that would be dedicated to the middle school and a drive between the middle school and the high school that would account for bus traffic. So we would have a drop-off scenario for the middle school and a bus loop for both the high school and the middle school. And of course, the car traffic for the high school is accounted for in your loop road already. We can connect the middle school and the high school together. The key opportunity there is for the gymnasium and athletic services to connect. We could do that in the form of a sky bridge. You can sort of see that little maroon piece of the middle school kind of connecting back where the gym is right now at the high school. That gives us opportunity for shared resources between middle school and high school. Academic resources, athletic resources, arts and music and drama resources as well. I think there's a lot of opportunities in this particular campus plan for those kinds of things. You can see we're building on the ball field, so we're going to talk about those replacement fields in just a minute, but there is room inside of that loop road to replace the softball field, which is where we're showing the building right now in this particular concept. And so one of the ball fields that we are displacing by the building could go back in that location at the high school campus site. In that lower corner you can see between the parking and the road right there. So what we've also displaced is a baseball field, and of course we've got the new practice field and track that we've been accounting for as well. And so we'll look at ways to solve that on the 45-acre parcel. In this particular option, it's a little dark on the screen. You can see a dark burgundy dashed line. That's an existing graded roadbed that runs through the site right now. And so in this particular option, which we're calling A.1, we would maintain and make use of that existing roadbed and place 2 fields on either side of it with adjacent parking. In this particular case, this is probably an extreme example of what we're talking about with the site. This is probably one of the least practical solutions that we're going to present to you, and it's presented largely to illustrate the contrast of some of the other things. So this maintains an opportunity to access the site from 2 roads, both Fontana and then up on the northern part of the site, Thomas Road sort of goes across the back piece of that property, utilizing the existing roadbed. We get the new practice field and track. We get a new replacement. It's really a replacement baseball field. It's not an additional or new one. It's really replacing the one that we displaced at the high school campus. But what we discovered when we were studying this with our site engineers is this particular solution gives us an unbalanced site of about 368,000 cubic yards of dirt, which amounts to approaching $20 million worth of effort just to get the dirt off of the site. So it stops being a particularly viable solution when you talk about that kind of volume of dirt and that amount of money that it takes to move that. We also end up with really substantially tall retaining walls in parts of the thing to really get the sites to flatten out for these particular ball fields. And if you can see in the very left, let's see if I can do my pointer, and this is the neighbor's property, and you can see the proximity to that. The other issue is when we fill and make a flat spot for this particular baseball field, we really, to get it to grade nicely, have to encroach on the neighbor's property, which is obviously not really a viable option. So this is really the extreme example of the kinds of challenges that many of us have kind of talked through as part of the planning process and what that does to the practicality of using the 45-acre site. And what we've learned from that particular study is that there's better places on the site to put things that give us an opportunity to get closer to balancing. And so in this particular option, one of the big things that we've done here is to focus our access point from Fontana Road, and you can see the road that kind of goes up this way, but then to not really continue the road up to Thomas. So we would have one way in and out from Fontana. And what that does for us is it lets us in this spot, which is the lowest part of the site, start to push our ball field farther away from the neighbor's property line and into the low spot, which we need because we're going to take and cut the top of this high spot off to put the track and field, and we're going to put that dirt in this low spot to make a flat spot for the baseball field. This gets us a lot closer to being able to balance a site. It's hard to say at the moment that we're for sure can balance, because we're missing some key pieces of information from our geotech report to understand how much rock we have on this property that we may encounter and what the suitability is of the soils for putting things like baseball and track and fields on top of the dirt. And so that's the next logical part of our planning process, is to get that information to really confirm these options that we're looking at. So the hope is that an option like this that focuses on the high part of the site and on the low part and sort of redistributing that dirt gets us our best opportunity to be a balanced site, which is going to be your best and most advantageous cost-wise in terms of solution. So I just talked through all my bullet points, so we'll scroll through these here. We're likely to still have retaining walls in most of these options, but the hope would be, obviously, we wouldn't have 60-foot tall retaining walls. That's a cost concern, and that's also really just a very tall retaining wall. So in option B1, we're switched now from option A. This says, let's leave the high school campus the way it is and leave the baseball field and leave the softball field. And what happens if we put a new middle school on the 45-acre parcel? So what you're going to see in the next two options are really a variation on the theme. You're going to see we're focusing on the high spot, which would be where this building would be. We're also focusing a field in the location at the low spot, which is still going to be our best opportunity to balance. In this particular option, we have an access point from Fontana. We reuse the existing road bed, and we can link up to Thomas Road. In the next option, again with my things, in the next option, we are gonna stop that access road that we already have, and we're gonna start to be able to maneuver our ball field in the most advantageous orientation and location in that particular low spot. And then the new school building would be up at the top with roads coming in and sort of separating themselves for bus and car traffic around the school building and then through the parking lots. That's really the culmination of all of our planning options that we have gone through. And there's not a lot of variety there, because a lot of the variety we've already discounted because of their extremes in site-related costs associated with some of the other options that we've explored. And so we've really now got ourselves focused, I think, in a place that talks about whether we want the middle school down at the high school or whether we want the middle school on the 45-acre parcel is really the big differences there. And there's some pros and cons to both, and we would look to our geotech and our survey information to help us make that decision, because suitability of soils might be appropriate for fields but not so much for buildings. So there might be some information there that can help us kind of direct ourselves in that direction. I want to talk a little bit about the construction costs. Obviously, that's a substantial part of the data that we're providing to DPI for the grant application. So I'm going to walk us through and really build our total project budget and talk through a few things. And so the first piece of the puzzle, which is the majority of the cost, obviously, is the cost of a new middle school building. In that cost assumes a reasonable amount of site work for a site that's prepared for a building. So it doesn't include all the moving around of dirt that we've been talking about. It does include some final grading, parking lots, essentially the stuff shown inside that loop road at the high school campus, and a similar scope of work on the 45-acre parcel. In this particular context, the building itself would largely cost the same, presuming we have suitable soils in both locations that doesn't impact our foundation costs there. The next piece of it that's really a constant is the athletic fields. And this also presumes that we have a flat place to put fields. And so in that number would be the final grading, turf, the equipment that is associated with those ball fields, the drainage, all of those things that are important. But it also does not include the extensive amount of moving around of dirt. We're going to carry that number in this next line item which says we're going to assume that the most viable option that we move forward with assumes a site that's balanced. When we stop, when we are pursuing options that aren't balanced, our site costs become out of balance with the total project cost. And so what we're saying is to get a site that's balanced ready for building or fields or some combination of those things, we think is going to cost around $5 million. That is variable to the extent that we don't have all of our geotech data yet. And that number would change based on the information and the data that we collect during that process. So that number is where we're accounting for the dirt moving around on that 45-acre parcel. That puts us at a subtotal for a construction project of pure construction costs at around $39 million. On top of that, we carry a line item for contingency. That is typically 5% on a project of this magnitude. It would account for unforeseen conditions that happen during construction. We know there's rock, but we may not know where all of it is because the geotech process doesn't identify everything. So there would be costs associated with encountering rock that we weren't planning for and other things like that. And so that is a cushion and a protection for you as the owner that allows you some confidence going into construction that you can negotiate through those kinds of unforeseen conditions. So it puts our total construction costs for a middle school and fields at $41 million rounded. Obviously, there's a little bit of change in there as well. That's part of the puzzle. That's part of the information that you need as to plan your project moving forward. There's some additional things that we tack onto that help you build a total project budget and allow you the opportunity for things. I want, as a quick reminder, that site development cost is our variable on this page that we are missing data for that will help us as we go forward into the next planning stages to get more clear on. So we take the construction subtotal and we have stuff to add on to that on top of it. There's going to be design fees. You'll need a team of architect and engineers to produce your documents, to build your building and to develop your site. That's an estimated number. The way architects are selected in projects like this is through a qualifications process. So you would pick a team that you feel is most qualified and then you negotiate that number. That's a pretty industry standard range. For a project of this size, that's always a sort of a sliding scale. In addition to that, you're going to have owner costs. The geotech and the surveying would come out of this pot of money that's owner costs. Things like new furniture for your middle school, technology for your middle school, those kinds of things that you outfit your school with. And we usually estimate that around 25% of your total construction cost to account for those things. That's your smart TVs in your classrooms and your desks in your classrooms and your books in your media center. All of those things would fall into that pot of money, along with the testing that we would do during design phase, and then there'll be some testing requirements as we go through construction as well. That would be in that number also. So really, your project total turns out to be about $53.5 million, all told when we factor in those costs. There is a yearly escalation that we should be considering at this stage of the game. That would be able to go away the closer we are able to predict when we're going to bid the project. Right now, we see a tremendous amount of volatility in the construction market. We've got a lot of supply chain challenges. We also have labor challenges, and it is creating a little bit of an unpredictable process. That said, if we consider about 4% year-over-year escalation is what we should use as part of our project budget, because if we start today, it's likely we're going to be bidding a year from now. And so we'll need to factor in what we think that escalation is going to be. We can talk about project delivery, Mark, if we want to get that far into the weeds tonight, or we don't need to. Owner costs is your big, on this particular screen, the big thing that you have control over. It is a function of how much furniture do you buy, what technology do you need. And so at this stage, it's obviously a planning number as well, but that's the big variable on this particular page is your owner costs for that. So that quickly ran through the whole presentation and all of the options. I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all might have and jump back to whatever slide you'd like to.
It's a lot of information.
Yes.
And it's a lot of money.
It
and
is.
I recognize that.
I want to absorb that till about October.
Well, we have until March 13th.
Tomorrow?
Owner's cost, would some of that be mitigated by what we already have at the middle school, for example?
It can.
Technology stuff?
It can, yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Anything that you would relocate from your middle school that you currently have would not be part of that. So that's where I say there's a lot of control that you have over that owner costs, in how much you have that's usable from the middle school that could be used in your new school.
Any thought given to, and I don't know what our figures are over the last 5-10 years, growth in the middle school?
Right now, our middle school numbers are actually lower this year than they were last.
Okay.
The latest growth numbers that I have seen, I believe they came through my future NC, and I'm not sure where they received their numbers, but they're actually predicting in the next 10 years a decrease in population in Swain County. I have a 10-year growth prediction from DPI that is counter to that. But I don't see our numbers moving us to the point where we need to worry about outpacing the space that we're talking about here or the space that we've created in other places already. I think that our space will be fine.
And Jerry, I think from a planning standpoint, the current middle school building's about 68,000 square feet. We're estimating at this point about a 95,000 square foot building. Some of that is taken up by the size of the gymnasium and the spectator seating that we're looking for in there, but some of that is going to be centered around a conversation for how much capacity should we build the school for compared to what we currently have. And so that's where we're going to get continue to plan a lot more detail around what's the right size of the school. I don't think it needs to exceed that 95,000 square feet, but we've got work to do to get really clear about how many classrooms and how many students we want to accommodate.
Possible grant funding is 40,000 for middle school, correct?
Yes.
40 million.
40 million.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yes.
yes, thank you. 40 million.
Sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
The option B that you have down, both of them, that's less dirt, having to move less dirt. I know you've got to move dirt, that's less than what? the
I think-
option A was.
I think our best options for less dirt are option B2 and option, let's scroll back, A2. The options where we cut the existing road bed short and don't take it all the way up to Thomas Road gives us the most flexibility on exactly the right place to put those fields in that low spot right there. The problem with the road going all the way to Thomas Road is that it's really in that low spot. So it's taking up space that we could otherwise use for a field. So I think either of the .2 options is probably the least amount of dirt moving and the highest potential for balancing.
Any thoughts?
Total cost difference between option A and option B1.
At this stage, they're really the same because we don't exactly know what the site cost is going to be in terms of exactly the number of cubic yards we're dealing with, which will need to come as part of that geotech report will help us kind of finalize those numbers. And so at this point, we are making some assumptions about the site that whatever option we proceed with needs to balance, and that $5 million is going to account for getting the site prepped in a way that balances and that makes flat places for us to build a school and fields on.
You know, one thing went through my mind, we're not even close to this, but I was looking at the two options of the school building, with the high school and the school building up there, is which one might be safer in the long run. I don't know if there was a difference as to school safety, which is an important issue anymore.
Having that gymnasium down there would be nice, option A, closer to the high school.
And that's one of the pieces that pushes the price on this too. Because when you add the type of gymnasium with the capacity that we're talking about, that's not a small facility. You know, and of course, you could pull that piece out.
What capacity are we thinking of?
We're talking somewhere around the neighborhood of 1,200 to 1,500 people, so that we could have graduation in there, so that whenever we have a playoff game with Cherokee and another, we don't have people standing on the walls.
Because we're not studying the soil there either, yeah, that.
We have not studied the soil there either, so that's part of that. And surveying there will be important, so we understand where utilities are crossing those fields and how the drainage is working as well.
I know that's all field, if I'm not mistaken, I believe.
And I know it's large, and I know that the cost is large. One of the questions that has to be answered, in my opinion, is how do we move forward with this, and if we do move forward with this? $40 million is not going to build everything that we're looking for.
When is that grant due? That
March 15th. Now, we've designed the grant so that there is time to plan. However, I don't know that you can write a grant without having an idea about where you want to put your building.
True.
Now, what was the cost difference between
The same.
on the field and up on top? What was it, 10?
The same.
About the same? So,
Not knowing that gym.
so if we did this, can we change our mind when we get the grant as to where it goes, as long as we're still in that parameter? We're gonna get the same thing one way or the other.
Stephanie, is there the capacity, if this grant were to be awarded, for us to revise and change placements? Because we would put a year of planning into the grant.
I don't know that you have to, I think based on what Nathan Lonnie said, I don't know that we particularly have to specify the exact location, it's just that we have to own the location.
So you can't use the grant for acquisition of property.
No.
But I don't think there's anything that locks us in. I think the message for the grant application in some respects is we've done a good bit of study and due diligence, and we're getting very clear on what we want to do and what our needs are. I think we're clear on what our needs are, and we're getting, and you know, the planning time, there would be applications that I think probably haven't started anything yet, that would be making a lot of those same decisions, Jerry, going forward in the planning process, that don't have as clear a picture as what we've been able to create thus far.
And so without picking a site, we would restructure the grant so that it states, this is our intent, but we'll have to do a good deal more have a lot more conversation based upon some of the information and the variables that we don't have in hand right now.
I'd like to see what the other folks think, maybe what your preference would be at this point. I mean, that can change, obviously, that's what I'm getting at. We may change it next week because of some other unforeseen factor.
I think we'll go with one of them, we can always change it.
Mm-hmm.
Just go with one, I
Let's
think.
lean toward one, and then we can, if we, next week, find more information that says no.
I think, after looking at it and looking at everything, it would be A2. Having the middle school at the high school, I think, is gonna be very, good from a pragmatic standpoint. You talked about public safety. Anytime you can only have to respond to one place, it's a whole lot better than having to respond to two. I think it's a very important thing to have middle school students close to high school students. The transition's a lot easier. The transition for academics, the transition for sports, all of that stuff is available. They get to see each other, get to interact with each other, maybe not on a daily basis, but they're right there in the same place, and I think that's very important for growth and understanding. Just as said on A2, it seems like A1's just not feasible. We talked about that. A2 is probably gonna be the best, with having those fields right there, having the school down there and both fields up top.
I want to tag on, if I may, Cody, to what you said. Kevin Allman and I had a conversation with Mike Murray, who is superintendent in Cherokee. Dr. Murray completed his dissertation on the effectiveness of middle school education. And he said the most important element that he has found where he is now and in his research and work towards his dissertation is the ability to provide role model and mentoring from older students to younger students. And it also provides an opportunity for those older students to develop a level of accountability and responsibility to be the role model and the mentor. So that plays significantly in my opinion, to what you just said about having these facilities on the same campus where they can transfer back and forth. And we could even have high school students who could be in the middle school as part of their academic expectations. So I think it's worth considering that.
I think it's important, the sharing of resources and things between the two facilities, I think is good, because I know, like in band, there's middle school students who are in the high school marching band and all those things. So I think that, would be a huge benefit to the middle schoolers as well as the high schoolers. So, I mean, just getting this information, I agree with Cody on the issue about the having them together and being able to utilize the same resources. I think it's a good idea at first glance at it, sure.
Yeah, I agree too. I think the option A and A2, kind of what you was looking at, as far as, it still leaves us room up there on that 45 acres in the future if we ever need to, years down the road, I'm sure we're gonna need to do something, so that don't take up everything. Also, just a question on this option, or if we do put the middle school there at the high school, I know that lunchroom is right there on the back too. Is there any way, as maybe, we got the gym maybe tied together, maybe the lunchroom's tied together.
I think that can be looked at. We would need to look at that logistically, because already the high school is running 2 lunch periods to serve everyone.
Well, I didn't, not to really serve, but maybe to share. Maybe, they'll have
To
their
share
own.
the share the cafeteria piece itself.
It's, it's so close there.
I think that could be researched and considered. That would be a good conversation with our own food and nutrition people as well.
I tend to agree with on the same thing. I down there, I think it would fit better. There's a lot of sharing. And I thought on the safety issue, you got 2 resource officers up there now. You'd have a third one. That's a whole lot safer than one that you'd have on top of the thing. So, and you've got everything locked in and with transportation going around it also. If that can happen, I think that's the best alternative, really. So I think we're in agreement, aren't we?
Yeah, and you're also gaining, you're gaining a new softball field, a new baseball field, and a track.
Yeah. And the track was the big piece that we didn't know what we were going to do with. And we got up to have a track. We win all the trophies in the state with a track. We don't have one now.
Well, and I know there's some concerns on the existing fields about drainage and other things that we can help to correct with a new, when we replace that softball field in its new location, along with, obviously, the building construction that we would be doing down there as well.
So we take that information tomorrow in our conversation with the commissioners. And Emily, and I didn't introduce the others.
That's true.
This is
forgot that.
Jonathan Kapp, who's working with us, and also Tim Lewis. And Tim, I'm pretty sure, is our cost estimator.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Tim is with Harper General Contractors. They've been a partner of ours on a lot of different projects doing construction estimating for projects like this and master planning. They obviously also build schools, a lot of them, so they're a deep resource for us in terms of where a lot of the cost information and comparison of other projects comes from.
So what I would suggest is that in the next 18 hours, if you all would share your thoughts with me by email, and then I will put some kind of a document together that we can take with us, along with the information that Emily brings as we have our conversation with Commissioner Smart evening, and then see exactly how we want to finish out this grant so that Kevin can then have 30 minutes to fix it, because he's that good.
Sleep.
I think right now we said A and A2, wasn't
Mm-hmm.
A and A2.
Yeah.
it? A and A2?
Yep.
Option A and A2?
Yeah, and it's really one option, but we gotta look at it on
Right.
really kind of two campuses, but, so that we can, if we wanna take out the other options to present to the commissioners, we can do that, or we can talk more broadly about some of those, what's come out of some of those other options. I'll look to you tomorrow to resolve that.
We'll resolve it then. If you have additional questions, for example, the cafeteria, how can we share that? We can put those down as things to consider in our study process.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say, as we look to bridge between those two schools on this site, we've proposed that drop off a bus drive through there, which we thought was viable to help us control vehicle traffic as kids are crossing that road between the two campuses. The connector that we've shown between the two gyms is really up a level so that we come in on the upper level of the gym, but we also can let fire trucks get underneath it, so we have good access for emergency vehicles and such, but would still let us walk from one building to the next without going outside. So there would be that loop right there, but it is elevated off the ground so that the buses and the emergency vehicles can get through that loop as well.
And that is buses only.
That would be buses only, and it would give them a chance from the bus parking lot, which is proposed as part of your
Gray.
yellow stuff here, and then the bus drop-off for the high school was proposed along this way anyways, and so this connection, we could drop off from the middle school and enter into the school from this direction for buses, and then from this direction for cars for the middle school, so that we get those separate entrances, and then cars would never go on this road. So during the school day, you'd have very little traffic, if any, across, back and forth on that drive between the two schools.
Okay. Anything else? Tell you what, you guys have been absolute godsends. I spoke to him yesterday evening on phone, or with this morning, I don't remember, it was probably both. And I told them that I am so thankful that we are their only client, because they have treated us like we are their only client. I'm grateful and appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been our privilege to get to work with all of you. I think the planning process that schools go through is really important. It lays the foundation for being able to successfully do projects like this. So this has been a pleasure for us to get to work on with you, and we certainly want to sort of see it across the finish line, and hopefully we get a successful grant outcome.
We're hoping.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all.
All righty. I guess I can leave.
Just leave
I'll
it
just
on.
leave that on.
Stephanie's going to come and educate us. Has anybody bought their lottery ticket lately? I would encourage you to all do that. You can buy them online since you're North Carolina citizens. And then when you
Guaranteed to
win, and then when you win, you can pay for all of this. I'll be sure to write you a letter for a tax credit.
I don't know if it's that high yet.
I think when I was at the gas station, it's 51 million.
That's just about right, isn't it?
Almost close, a couple more days. Right at it. Okay, all yours.
Stephanie, do you need someone to operate that machine for you while you're talking?
I hope not.
Okay. Thank you all. Travel safely.
Thanks. Thank
Thank
you.
While we're waiting for this, Tommy sent a message that having having that middle school there beside the high school also gives us the opportunity to share staff resources, because we're moving to a place pretty quickly where it's difficult to find particular certifications, science, math, and we could share some of those resources that way, which would be beneficial for all of our programming. Because, yes,
It would, wouldn't it?
It'll be good.
that took 15 minutes less than I expected to. I'm thankful. There you are.
All right, well, good evening. It's been a long time since I've been up here. As you're aware, we've been operating under a continuing resolution that was passed by the board in May. And so we are just now getting ready to hopefully approve a 21-22 budget. Just for information, the state budget was passed November 19th, 2021. Once that was passed, then we were waiting a while for there to be some clarification of policies by the State Board of Education, which got passed in January. But the state budget provided for salary increase for all public school employees in this fiscal year, which is really good. It's been a long time since everybody has received an increase. The increased retirement rate is 22.89%, and the health insurance rate went up to $7,019 per employee per year. There were a lot of new allotments that came as part of this, and most of it has to do with ESSER. In the state budget, there was a lot that had to do with the salary and also bonuses. For teachers and instructional personnel, they each got a step increase for all, plus there was a 1.3% salary schedule increase. On average, that resulted in about 2.5% increase overall. That also resulted in a range of increases between $650 to $2,680 per year, which is about 1.3% to 5.4% overall. In addition, psychologists, speech and language pathologists, and audiologists also received an additional $350 per month supplement in addition to the regular certified schedule for teachers. And school counselors receive an additional $100 per month in addition to the regular instructional certified schedule.
We will also be the recipient of a new allotment this year for low wealth to increase salary supplements, or in our case, provide salary supplements for teachers and instructional support staff. And those are for certified staff only. Assistant principals, they received also a step increase, and they also had a 1.3% increase to their salary schedule, the same as teachers. Principals, their salary schedule increased overall 2.5%. And our non-certified staff received the greater of 2.5%, or whatever the amount was to get them up to the $13 per hour. And that will be increased in the 22-23 year up to $15 per hour. And central office received an increase of 2.5%. There were a lot of bonuses in this budget. The first one was a $300 bonus for all state-paid teachers and instructional support who are employed as of January 1st of 22. We have already paid that bonus. We paid that on January 28th to all of our teachers and instructional support staff. And we used additional funds from our ESSER funds and other funding that we had for bonuses. Performance bonuses were continued this year for AP, which is Advanced Placement, and CTE, also for state-funded teachers. The ones that received those bonuses were all state-funded teachers, but the max per the state that any individual could receive was $3,500. And that was based on the 2021 results, test results. We processed and paid those on January 28th as well. ESSER 3 teacher bonus. Teachers were eligible to receive, teachers and instructional support once again, were eligible to receive $1,000 in bonus money if they were employed as of January 1st, 22, and as if they completed professional development as something to do with COVID and with learning loss, or just ways to combat COVID and deal with COVID. We processed and paid that, and we did pay all teachers and instructional support once again instead of just the state-funded from our ESSER funds. We also were the recipient this year of the small and low wealth signing bonus, which you approved last meeting. Teachers were eligible for a signing bonus up to $1,000, and that was matched on a one-to-one basis from the state. We processed and paid that on January 28th. Principals were eligible for an $1,800 bonus, and those were just principals, not assistant principals, and they each received an $1,800 bonus, and that was processed and paid January 28th. All personnel, so that would be certified as well as non-certified staff, were all eligible for a $1,000 bonus, provided that they were employed as of January 1st, 21. That was prorated for part-time employees, and we consider a part-time employee anyone that works between 20 to 29 hours per week. So as long as they were employed 30 hours or more, they were considered full-time, and they received the $1,000 bonus. If their salary was less than $75,000 per year, they were eligible for an additional $500 bonus. So that was a total of $1,500 per employee for anyone that receives less than $75,000 in annual salary. We processed and paid that on December 29th. With all the salary increases this year, the state did retro those back to July 1st. And we were required to pay that retro in one lump sum bonus, and that had to be paid before the end of March, and we went ahead and paid that February 28th, 22. As I mentioned before, as part of the state budget, health insurance increased to $7,019 per person per year. That was a pretty substantial increase, as you can see, over last year, considering in the last 5 years it's just been a anywhere from a $26 last year, but usually it's about $100 to $200 more per year. That increase resulted in an overall increase of about $174,000 this year, and that will result in about a $350,000 increase overall next year. The retirement rate increased to 22.89%, which resulted in about $193,000 in addition this year. Allotments, there are a few changes in allotments and some new allotments, but the most significant, program enhancement teachers. For the last couple of years, the state's been allotting a couple of positions for program enhancement teachers because they wanted us to no longer be paying program enhancement teachers out of our classroom teacher allotment for K-5. Program enhancement teachers are any of our PE teachers, art, music, language. Any of those teachers are no longer eligible to be paid off of the classroom teacher allotment and will have to be paid off the program enhancement allotment. And we've got, I think, 4.5 position allotments. We did receive a school psychologist allotment this year. That's new this year when we received 1.5 positions. And as part of the 22-23 budget, we will be required to employ at least one full-time psychologist, which currently we do have one full-time psychologist. The other half position, we can convert that to dollars and contract with the psychologist, which is what we currently do. School technology funds, last year they had taken that out of the budget because of the school business modernization plan, and that has been returned back to the budget this year. It's about $23,000. And the new allotment for this year is the feminine hygiene product grant, which we received $1,500 in allotment. Federal allotments, since the onset of COVID since 2020, there have been 55 new federal programs set up by the state. So all the federal money that's coming down has been split up into 55 different programs. To date, we have received 27 new federal grants or programs. We've received a total of $6.2 million in ESSER funds, CARES Act, and some CRF funding. We have spent to date $2.2 million, and we have about $3.9 million remaining. And I've given you the information there. They start to expire the end of September this year. We've got about $295,000 still remaining that will expire in September. $729,000 will expire next September, and $2.9 million they'll expire in 2024. Other grants that you've heard already about this year are the changes to the needs-based public school capital fund, which is the critical needs grant for construction. That was expanded this year with the increase in the amount of the grants, and also increase in the eligibility. It's no longer just Tier 1 counties, but it's opened up to all counties. Also, school safety grants. There were grants available for students in crisis, training grants and equipment grants, which we have been awarded an equipment grant of about $222,000.
Yes.
Okay, so for the budget this year, we have a proposed budget of $30,916,394. That's compared to last year. Our initial budget was $29,383,462, of which $5 million of that was for the high school construction project. So really our budget last year was about $24 million. So that's an increase of about $6 million, and that's a direct result of all the ESSER funds. Just a visual here of how the budget is split out. Of that $30 million, 54% is coming from state funds, the state public school fund, about 19% from federal funds, and 15% from our special revenue fund, which is our impact aid funding. And the rest is for capital, child nutrition, and our local current expense. State Public School Fund, the proposed budget is $16,564,927, which, like I said, is 54% of the overall budget. Last year, it was about $15.5 million, so that's an increase of about $1 million. The majority of that is for salary and fringes. That makes up over 80%, 90% of the whole budget. The rest is for services and a little bit, some supplies. We do try to keep, as much as possible, salary and fringe and state funding. Fund 2, which is our local current expense, is the majority of that's from county funding. We're receiving about $940,000 from the county, as well as some funds for our Synovia contract for our bus GPS system. And also we're receiving about $180,000 for our reading assistants. We still have 5 reading assistants, 3 at West and 2 at East. We also pay out of our local current expense all of our utilities and our maintenance staff, not our maintenance cost. Fund 3 is our federal funds budget. It's $5.8 million this year as compared to about $1.7 million last year. Once again, the majority of that is salary and fringe at about 66% of the budget. And then we do have some capital outlay and also budgeted in there. And we'll have more once we start spending the ESSER 3 money. Fund 4 is capital. You've seen our proposed capital budget before when we provided that to the county. There has been some changes to the capital budget, and I have provided a detail of that for you in your packet. But this year is $631,895. Last year was $5.6 million because of the school construction. We receive about $160,000 from the county for our capital outlay. There's about $100,000 in here that's also from the state for our lease for our yellow buses. And then we have a few small grants that we're using right now for the barn that we're building. Child nutrition, the proposed budget is $1.9 million. Prior year was $2.2 million. There is about 56% of that is for salary and fringe, and $743,000 is also for supplies, and there's about $75,000 of capital outlay. Our special revenue fund, that is, the majority of that is our impact aid funding, but we also have other grants that we track through our special revenue fund in addition to our impact aid. Current year is $4.7 million. Last year is $4.1 million. There's 43% of that is for salary and fringe, $1 million for services, and about $1.5 million for supplies. There's also a transfer of $90,254, which will be a transfer to capital outlay. In the Fund 8 budget, we have budgeted $2.5 million in impact aid funds. That's about the same as what we received last year, and that is mainly because our application for the current year was still based on our 2020 student counts. There's been 2 years in a row that the Department of Education has allowed us to use our 2020 numbers in order to do our application, just because it's been so difficult to get the surveys back. So we're projecting to use $644,700 of fund balance. That's compared to about $526,000 that we budgeted last year. However, last year we wound up, we did not use any of our fund balance, and right now our fund balance for our special revenue fund is right at $5 million. I'm not gonna go through all the positions, but I did wanna give you some information just about how many positions are funded by each, in each fund. Just as overall, there's 248.6 positions in our state public school fund. There are 26.16 positions in our federal funds. And local current expense, there's 11.38 positions. Child nutrition's about 24.5 positions. And our special revenues, 22.6 positions. And that's not including extracurricular. I did give you the extracurricular positions, not people, but positions that we fund. That's a total of 333 full-time equivalents. So we've got a lot of part-time positions that make up that, but we've got about 333 full-time equivalents. And that is basically the highlights. And I will take any questions, but I also wanted to tell you, in your packet, you have a copy of the formal resolution. Just a reminder, we have the board approve the budget resolution based on the two-digit purpose code. But I just want to give you the other information in here, you know, broken down by what we call object code, which is the salary and the fringe, the supplies, capital outlay. But the way the board approves the budget is by the two-digit purpose code. So I've given you a copy of that, as well as an updated copy of the capital budget in there. And then I also gave you just some more condensed versions so that, you know, you can kind of look at a quick glance to see the breakdown between the different funds and the percentage breakdown. Do y'all have any questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
We can't brag enough on her. I'm telling you what, we close the doors tomorrow if we lost her. She's good, and I won't tell you how much, we don't pay her the hours she works, or we go broke if we pay her by the hour. So you are appreciated, you know
Well, thank
that,
you.
I hope.
I appreciate it. Thank you all.
Our intent tonight was not to ask you to pass the budget resolution, but to give you an opportunity to look at the numbers and digest that, and then if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Stephanie and ask, or to me. And then at our March meeting, we would ask that you could have discussion, but that we would pass the budget resolution at that point.
Okay,
Okay?
all right.
Would like to have an opportunity to discuss some personnel matters, not for the purpose of having any decision-making tonight, but to look at where we're going. And so I think that we should probably, since we would be using names in that conversation, that it would be wise for us to move into a closed session.
Okay. You got that motion with you?
I do not.
It's not in here in this. I don't believe it.
I don't know if it needs to be recited word for word. I think we could probably just make a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of discussing matters. Yeah, it's 14.31.1.
He's got it, fine. Got it.
Okay, he's got it, so I withdraw my previous. Go ahead, Travis.
Go ahead.
Move Swain County Board of Education go into closed session for the purpose of discussing information that's privileged, confidential, and not a public record under North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11.
Got a second to that?
Second.
All right, all in favor by a show of hand, we'll be back shortly.
Mr. McKinney, I believe that that concludes the business that we have on the agenda for tonight.
And the only thing left is tomorrow night,
Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock here.
you gonna give them this?
Yes, we'll look at that, we'll work on it some more tomorrow. They'll need to see that.
Okay.
And it would be nice to have somebody else at the meeting, if you can make it.
Can either or all, because you put it on the announcement.
Yeah, it's been
But I'll be
advertised.
there if you don't care.
Right.
I'll have to check.
I
don't
get
make-
it, I
I don't
know.
make the rules.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'll let you know.
No, you need to take care of your son. Family matters. So Travis can't be here, he's gotta be with his son tomorrow night.
Does he play in
He's gonna visit college,
that? Oh, yeah, you gotta be
UNC
there.
Charlotte.
Oh, dude. You ain't never failed me where he is doing something, and you can't fail him.
You gotta do that.
Yeah,
We'll be okay.
yeah. Where's he going?
UNC Charlotte,
Oh, okay, good.
To look.
to look.
Have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Someone,
All
second.
right, all in favor, stand up, and we're adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's gonna go look.
That's a good little school. Well, actually, it's cheap.